Federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without authorization of the copyright holder. This infringement of copyright is called fair use, and is allowed for purposes of criticism, news, reporting, teaching, and parody. This means you! Welcome to Season 2 of Crappy Cartoons, and I feel like starting strong by starting with some of your requests. I may not get to all of them, and if I don't get to one, don't fret. They'll be pushed into a vault until I take one out and review it. So, what have I chose to review to kick off 2016? Why a full-length review of a full-length movie to a show I covered 4 times last year? And if you guessed My Little Pony, congratulations, you know what movie I chose to review, and you know me well enough to make a connection. Let me make this clear. Despite the fact I have reviewed this show 4 times, it has a 1 out of 4 good episode rating to me, so obviously I am not a brony. Aside from the pilot, which was meh, and the 4 episodes I reviewed, and this one, are the only things I've seen of My Little Pony. I bring this up because this is going to be vital later in the review, and we'll get there when we get there. So, Hasbro in 2013 figured they wanted to make more money off their My Little Pony fan base and decided to expand themselves into making the ponies humans, so that they can sell off Barbie dolls that look significantly like their favorite characters. And then they decided it would be a great idea to make the concept into 3 movies in a series called Equestria Girls. Today I'll be looking at the second of the trilogy. The movie starts in a cafe with some singing and arguing. The singers are our villains, the Dazzlings, Adagio, Sonata, and Aria. Not that it would matter because I can't tell the difference between the 3, so unless the movie explicitly says their name, I'll just call them the blue one, the purple one, and the yellow one. Anyway, the 3 have a conversation about how miserable they are in the human world until they see a burst of magic off in the distance, for whatever reason. Going to say this now, the movie doesn't explain a lot, other than it's magic. It just kind of happens and leads our antagonists to the plot. One intro credits song scene later, and we quickly learn that this is a musical. Now, just to get it out of the way, I don't actually hate this movie's music. While bubblegum pop has never explicitly been my favorite genre of music, if it's done right, it's not bad. And just like previous episodes of My Little Pony that have appeared on the series, the music is well done enough to make this so much easier to watch. It's not the greatest, but it's not bad. Cut to the Academy that will be spinning for the majority of this movie, at where we see the groups of people working on posters for a music festival, where we cut to some familiar faces, Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, previously seen on this show. They only make a minor cameo, though, long enough to introduce this last movie's antagonist, Sunset Shimmer. I only know this because they hammered in that she used to be the Skull Bully. And boy oh boy am I glad they hammered it in and mentioned it as a running gag throughout the movie. She then gets called across the gym by Pinkie Pie in the group, -1 Tara Strong. Don't worry, we'll get to her a lot later. And there's a bit of small talk before Princess Luna and Celestia, who are principals in this world I guess, talk about the high school musical showcase they're having to raise money for Canterlot High School, and then decide to hammer in the fact that Sunset Shimmer was a bad girl, which makes everyone remember she was there. Cut to the music room where Sunset is complaining about the fall formal that I assume was from the last movie, which I wasn't requested to watch, so I didn't bother, as I didn't know prior to watching this even existed. Anyway, apparently in the last movie, Sunset turned into a literal demon and tried to turn everyone into zombies for her own personal army. Fuck, why aren't I watching that movie? We then get a song number I can't skip because it's important, as we see when they play music they get horse ears and a tail because fan service, and because magic of friendship or some shit like that. It's never really clear. After the song, they then talk about the effects, and Rainbow Dash calls it her band, and then goes on to insult Rarity and Applejack. After Character I Don't Care About number 4 is introduced as a love interest to Twilight Sparkle and ex-love interest to Sunset. Take it easy, folks. It's a footnote. Anyway, Sunset then gets called to the principal's office because she volunteered to show some new kids around from the 3 from the beginning, so she's going away for about 5 seconds as Rainbow Dash wants to practice her song instead of wanting to try Fluttershy's song. We then cut to the tour, which is mostly padding, with one notable line of Sunset telling the Dazzlings that there's a musical showcase, which obviously they're interested in, because in case you forgot 10 minutes ago, they sing to devour. I may have forgot to mention that, but don't worry. The movie reminds us before giving us the best line in this movie that I'll risk copyright for.
You'll have to excuse them. They're idiots.
Anyway, cut to the cafeteria when we get a musical number that causes everyone to argue like the beginning of the movie, but this time about having a battle of the bands. Anyway, the girls then decide to go to Celestia and Luna to tell them about the Dazzlings and their magical intent to ruin the showcase. However, they got to the principals first and hypnotized them to be all for it. The girls then talk about how they plan on beating the Dazzlings, making sure we remember that Sunset was an antagonist. Rainbow Dash brings up cell phones, which sparks an idea from Sunset to use a book to write to Twilight Sparkle and Equestria, where we then transition to the only scene with the ponies we're going to get. Basically, Twilight builds a portal that allows her to travel. I mean, we get a story behind the Dazzlings, which are basically sirens, and if you know what sirens are, you basically get the gist of the plot. On a side note, how come there isn't 2 Twilight Sparkles? Was this explained at all in the last movie? Anyway, Twilight goes through the portal into the human world, and they talk about the sirens and magical abilities, and giving us yet another reminder that Sunset was a villain. I am starting to see a pattern here. Anyway, they then go to the party where everyone is arguing. Yeah, there was a party. And Twilight bumps into generic love interest, where we get really the only scene where they're together, as Twilight sees the Dazzlings and then decides she has to do a thing, which winds up being cringy as fuck. Actually, probably the most cringiest anything that I've ever seen. Anyway, Twilight goes on about how it didn't work, and then they come to the conclusion that their music is the answer, because of course it is. I guess to be perfectly fair with the logic they give, it's obvious that it makes more sense in universe than anything. Anyway, they decide to allow Twilight into the band. Unfortunately, she can't play any instruments, so instead she'll sing. Yay, I get to hear Tara Strong sing. She's actually really good when she wants to be fair. Anyway, Rainbow Dash talks about it being her band again, and when they ask for a spell, Twilight doesn't have one, and then Spike decides to go on about how badass she is. Is no one going to address the fact a dog is hanging around the school? Oh well. They then spend the night at Pinky's. They put pressure on Twilight to write the spell before running off for pizza. We then see that Twilight can't even write English, much less a song. Didn't she do some sort of note-writing thing to Princess Celestia in the first season? I distinctly remember that in my review of Ticketmaster. Is that not being taken into consideration here? I know this comes up way after that, because they were in a castle in Ponyville earlier, which was seen in the Cutie map, which was seasons after the Ticketmaster. No? Not important? Alright. We then cut to at night, where Twilight wakes up to work on the song, and we get a moment that's supposed to be touching between Twilight and Sunset, where they talk about how expectations of a person can fuck them up, and then we get a cheap laugh at some person feeding a pet rock for who knows what reason. We then cut to practice, where Tara Strong was told to sing as off-key as possible.
That sounded way better than the last 5 times you played it.
Nope.
So far, you're at 2 actually funny jokes, movie. Keep it up. But, by the way, who was that guy? I suppose it doesn't matter. It was good timing nonetheless. But the band decides to have a panic before deciding to compete in the Battle of the Bands. Rarity dresses up for the occasion, which makes it incredibly easy for the other bands to sabotage, yet they still win because fuck it, the plot needs them to. Before that, though, they have an argument before Sunset tells them to go to practice before meeting up with the Dazzlings, who push a few buttons. We also get a montage of a tournament before seeing it come down to the Rainboons, the Dazzlings, and some character named Trixie, which I'm not gonna lie, I found to be quite entertaining my first time watching this. They then make the #1 band mistake of playing the song the lead singer wants to play instead of what everyone else wants to play, and saying she can do it solo, which makes the rest of the band half-ass it until Rainbow Dash almost reveals their powers, which Sunset comes in and stops, but they still win somehow because the plot needs them to. Actually, to be fair, it's because the Dazzlings hypnotize the principals. But it may as well be because the plot needs them to at this point. The Dazzlings are already successful enough because there's a bunch of fighting in between the groups, so the conflict has already kicked off, and we can start the resolution. Or, rather, we could pad the movie out a little bit longer. That's cool too, I guess. So the Dazzlings hint at Trixie doing a thing to keep the Rainbows busy and out of the finals. By the way, have I mentioned yet how much I love Trixie's character? It's a cartoon, and yet we still have characters hamming it up and overacting just so they can take the spotlight off the scenery. I think that's what's actually called chewing the scenery, and Trixie does it to a very entertaining extent in these final moments. I'm not gonna lie. Kinda makes me want to see more of her in future reviews. Anyway, Spike is the only character who didn't fall into the great Trixie's trap, so he's basically their only hope as the door is locked. So, what can he do? Well, my suggestion would be to go to Ponyville and try to get help from the other 5, but we'll get to what he actually does here in a little bit. The girls then have an argument that helps feed the Dazzlings as the bad girls have basically won, and nothing can possibly stop them as the heroes are trapped and everyone else is basically under their spell, except Miss Deus Ex Machina, whose name I had to look up because they don't tell you who it is at all, because she has not been relevant until this point, and even after this, she's still not as relevant as she has no speaking parts. This, for those who are confused as I was, is DJ Pony, also known as Vinyl Scratch, and you can go ahead and make the connection of what she does. They then decide to play Fluttershy's song using Vinyl's car that apparently can transform into a DJ stand because Deus Ex Machinas, am I right? However, we do get this admittedly awesome scene of the Battle of the Bands, though I can't help but to want to put Sailor Moon music over some of these scenes. Long story short, they break the spell in the Dazzling's crystal necklaces, rendering them powerless. Twilight and What's-His-Face have another scene, and Vinyl and Sunset become part of the band, and they all live happily ever after at the end. My god, this movie is certainly something. It's obvious this movie was only written as fan service to the brony crowd, as there are several references to characters in the show that unless you knew every episode, you were not going to understand or care about. And while it might be good at doing that, passing viewers like myself are easily lost in references that we don't understand, so in this case it fails as a standalone movie. The plot is painfully contrived, even starting at a weird spot that loses me, and there are a ton of unanswered questions that I suppose would make more sense if I watched the prequel, but as it stands, it still barely makes any sense as to why the Dazzlings would find their way to the school, why Vinyl wasn't affected by the Dazzlings, aside from the throwaway gag that they threw in there, why there isn't another Twilight Sparkle in this world, and why several other similar questions like that. I understand, it's a sequel, some things will be left out. But why base most of your content on that prequel? You're basically begging for disaster on the words once upon a time, metaphorically speaking, of course. Not to mention the annoying parts of this movie, as the bickering and booing can and does overshadow a few scenes that are supposed to show emotion. It becomes really bad in the end, though, as it becomes really hard to feel anything during these scenes. This movie is also very boring at best, and painfully cringy at worst. It may go back to the whole references thing I mentioned, at how, unless you're true to heart brony, you'll understand every joke here, which basically everything else, nobody else will care about. This really does hurt your movie in the long run, as if you're going to make a movie for fan service purposes, it honestly shows that pandering is the only thing you give a shit about in the end, which I suppose I should saw coming, as My Little Pony was one of those shows that was made as a marketing scheme to sell products to little kids. So I suppose I shouldn't have expected much, but my god did this fail. Happy 2016, everyone. Here's to another good year. If you would like to get caught up on future reviews, there's a link in the description below to a Facebook page. Basically, all that I'm gonna tell you. I mean, you can follow it, you can get all the updates to future reviews if you care. If not, I'm not gonna force you to do it. It's all up to you.